My name is Irene Zempi. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the lead of the NTU Hate Crime Research Group and also a committee and a previous chair of the BSc Hate Crime Network. I am excited to welcome our guest speaker, Ellen Davenport-Pleasance, who will present a paper on minority stress and its relation to mental health and family functioning in bisexual plus mother families. The presentation will last about 30 minutes, and then we will have around 10 to 15 minutes for questions, thoughts, reflections, but also opportunities to share your research if or professional background if you're doing any work in this area. The presentation is also being recorded, but not the Q&A, only the talk. And then it will be shared via the BSc Hate Crime Network YouTube channel. I will now hand over to Ellen.
Thank you. I will just share my screen. Hopefully this all goes smoothly. I can't see you. Well, actually, I can see you at the side, so that's totally fine. I'm just also going to start a timer. Thank you for the introduction. As has already been stated, I'm talking today about minority stress and its relation to mental health and family functioning in bisexual plus mother families. My name is Ellen Davenport-Pleasance. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm joining you today from UCL. I'm part of the Thomas Coram Research Unit here within the Social Research Institute at UCL. And I'm happy for you to email me at the email address on the screen if you have any questions or thoughts or want to share your own research with me that might be relevant. I would love to hear from you. I will just start off with, hopefully it lets me change my slide. Yes, brilliant. I'll just start off with telling you a bit about myself and about my journey. So I come from a psychology background. I studied for my BA in Psychological and Behavioural Sciences at the University of Cambridge. And during this time, I did an internship within the Centre for Family Research, and they were doing lots of work on all types of different LGBTQ parent families. However, I noticed a distinct lack in the research literature concerning bisexual parents, with most of the research being focused on lesbian mothers and gay fathers, and then a kind of emerging field on trans parents, and much, much less on bisexual parents. So I applied to the ESRC for a grant, and I was awarded a 1+3, so for my MPhil and my PhD, to do some research about bisexual plus mothers, and that's how I came to be in this position today. So my master's was a qualitative research project about bisexual plus mothers and how they came out to their children. So I was particularly interested in this because bisexuality is an identity that's often not evident based on your relationship or based on visual kind of cues, because there's not so many kind of established visual cues that mark people as bisexual or that people can use to signify or signal to others that they are bisexual. So I was interested in how bi plus mothers spoke to their children about their bisexuality, if this is something that they spoke about, and how they kind of explained that to their children. And if you're interested in that, I did publish a paper on it a couple of years ago now in LGBTQ plus Family and Interdisciplinary Journal. So if you'd like to read more about that project, that is there. And again, I welcome any questions about that when we go on to the discussion part of today's meeting. After my master's, I went on to do my PhD, which was also funded by the ESRC. So thank you to them for funding my research. And I actually transferred from the University of Cambridge to UCL during that time with one of my supervisors who was taking a new job here at UCL, which was really great to kind of make more connections with different colleagues and people working on different topics. Anyway, a little bit about my PhD. So this was a mixed methods study of various different aspects of bisexual plus mother families. So looking at minority stress, maternal mental health, family functioning, and child adjustment. And that's what I'm talking to you about today, but only the quantitative part of this mixed methods study. During my PhD, I've also had the privilege to teach at 4 universities. So I've been teaching social science at King's London and at UCL, and psychology at the University of Cambridge, and sociology at Anglia Ruskin University. And there's this question mark on the right side of the screen that you'll see because I have just submitted my PhD. I have my Viva scheduled for next week. So I am now looking for jobs. So if anybody wants to hire me, that would be brilliant. Or just any advice about kind of what to do after you finish your PhD, careers in academia, very, very welcome. Okay, so my PhD is guided by 3 kind of main schools of thought or theoretical frameworks. The first being minority stress theory, which I chose because it's one of the most kind of commonly used models of stigma and well-being for sexual minority individuals, used within social science and psychological research. I combine this with family systems theory. So I view families as kind of interconnected, complex social systems in which different family members are connected to one another and are not necessarily independent, but are interdependent, influencing each other in various different ways. And I also combine this with intersectional thinking, but perhaps not in the typical way. So often intersectional research focuses on intersections between gender and race, or racism and sexism, for instance, or between kind of race and LGBTQ identities. But I'm kind of using it in the way in which I view being a mother as one of those identities. So I'm looking at people's experiences as situated at the intersection of these different systems of oppression and of these different identities. And I think about the ways in which perhaps the experiences of somebody who is bisexual and a mother might be different to those of someone who's bisexual and not a parent or not a mother, or different to those of mothers who are not bisexual plus. I wasn't sure how familiar everybody was with minority stress theory, so I thought I would just take a couple of minutes to tell you a little bit about it so that we're all on the same page. So in short, the very, very short version of this is that individuals who belong to a minority group, such as a sexual minority, experience or can experience poorer mental and physical health outcomes as a result of this kind of minoritized, marginalized identity or stigmatized social status. And this is because of experiencing minority stresses, which are not shared by people who are not part of that minority. And these can be classified into distal minority stresses, so external stresses such as prejudice events and discrimination, but also internal, so proximal minority stress processes such as expecting to experience rejection or concealing one's identity or internalizing things like homophobia, transphobia, biphobia. And these experiences of minority stress are then associated with poorer mental and physical health outcomes. But this can be mitigated by coping and social support factors such as individual and community level factors. This model is mainly or originally focused on the effects of minority stress on the individual. So think about individuals' mental and physical health outcomes. However, I'm using it, well, extending it to think about the effects of minority stress on families and on parenting. So kind of extending on the right side of this model, almost adding more boxes about what minority stress might be associated with. So as I said, I became interested in this topic and started looking what was out there, what studies had already been done on this topic, and found that there was very little research to date that's kind of dedicated its attention to bisexual plus parent families. So there's been 2 systematic literature reviews. The first in 2013, I mean more than 10 years ago now, but only found 7 studies that reported findings specific to bisexual parents. This doesn't mean that those studies were actually focused on bisexual parents or bisexual parenting, but they made some sort of reference to bisexual parenting. And a more recent study in 2020 identified 36 subsequent articles with relevance to bisexual parents. I've been thinking about kind of what underlies this invisibility of bisexual parents or bisexual parenthood in academia. and published a paper last year about the kind of intentional and accidental erasure of bi+ parents in research. So I identified some different ways in which research commonly makes bi+ parents invisible, such as ignoring bi+ parents, aggregating them within the LGBTQ umbrella and not properly attending to potential differences in their experiences, or how their experiences might be different to those of lesbian and gay or trans parents, for instance. Unlabeling, so using terms like same-sex parent families, which don't necessarily attend to the sexual orientation of the parents in those families, but mainly focus on family structure. Again, maybe missing some of the nuances in terms of differences in experiences between those who might identify as lesbian versus bisexual, for instance. And then also mislabeling, either intentionally or unintentionally. So mislabeling bi+ parents typically as lesbian or gay if they're in same gender relationships, but also potentially as heterosexual if they're in mixed gender heterosexual passing relationships. And I essentially talk about how these different research practices contribute to bi-invisibility of parents in academic literature. So in terms of the prior research, there's not a lot, but we have got some prior research on bisexual mothers' mental health, which typically finds that bisexual mothers, or bisexual parents rather, experience more mental health difficulties than other sexual minority parents. But most of this research has focused on the perinatal period, so the period kind of around becoming a parent, or has focused on comparisons between bi+ mothers and other sexual minority parents, and kind of fails to explore the nuances within the group of bi+ mothers. There's also some prior literature that has looked at parenting and family functioning in bisexual mother families, but most of this research is qualitative, which is obviously very in-depth and insightful, but doesn't necessarily allow us to look at kind of the predictors of things like parenting stress or parenting quality. So there has been some prior research on bi+ parents coming out to their children, or their views on gender socialization, or the perceived benefits of their bi+ identity for their parenting, things like queer cultural socialization practices or mainstream queer socialization, and also their kind of parenting efficacy. But research is yet to truly or adequately look at how they experience minority stress and how this impacts mothers' mental health, and their parenting quality and other aspects of family functioning. And much less research has looked at children's adjustment and well-being and health in families with bisexual+ mothers, or bisexual+ parents in general. So there was one study in 2022 that looked at the association between maternal sexual orientation and children's kind of physical health outcomes, and also one study that's looked at children's psychological well-being and compared bisexual parent families to straight, gay and lesbian parent families. And they found that children of bisexual parents had elevated levels of adjustment difficulties, but actually when they controlled for parental psychological distress, which is a minority stress indicator, this difference between the groups disappeared. But questions remain unanswered about the different aspects of children's development, and how family factors such as parenting quality or parenting stress, or maternal factors such as experiences of minority stress might predict children's adjustment outcomes. Another key limitation of the literature to date is that it has kind of looked at bisexual+ mothers as a whole group, and not necessarily attended to differences that might exist based on relationship constellations. So bi+ mothers can be parenting in lots of different relationship constellations. So they might have one partner, they might have multiple partners, they might have no partner or partners. And they could also have partners of different genders. So they might be in a relationship that appears to the world as heterosexual. They might be in a same gender relationship. As I said, they might have multiple partners and be in that kind of relationship as well. And some prior research on general bisexual populations, so not specific parenting parent populations, but general bisexual populations, has pointed to important differences in bisexual individuals' experiences, or their mental health, their stress, internalized stigma such as internalized bi-negativity, experiences of exclusion and rejection from lesbian and gay communities. I've said stress twice, oops. LGBT community connectedness and experiences in relationships based on the number of partners that they have and the gender of these partners. So it's really important that future research, and that's why I did this in this study, looks at these within group differences to better understand bi+ mothers' experiences and how they might differ based on their relationship constellations. So this quantitative study looked at answering 3 research questions. The first concerned the factors that predict maternal mental health in bi+ mother families, and whether any of these differed between bi+ mothers, for instance, with one male partner, one female partner, no partner, or multiple partners. I was also interested in the factors that predicted family processes in bi+ mother families, and also what predicted children's adjustment, so children's well-being in families with bi+ mothers, and whether this differed between different family structures as well. So I won't spend too long, but just in case you're a kind of visual person, this was a model I created of my hypotheses for each of the 3 research questions. So I hypothesized that there would be relationships between minority stress and maternal mental health, as well as between minority stress and family processes, and between minority stress and children's adjustment. And I also thought about some of the resilience factors, so the factors that can protect people against the potentially negative impact of minority stress on their lives. And I also thought about the role of maternal mental health in parenting and the different relationships between family processes. So can things like parental stress predict parenting quality, for instance? So I recruited mothers who had to be over the age of 18 for ethical reasons, and they had to have at least one child between the ages of 4 and 17, just because of one of the measures that I was using of children's adjustment had the restrictions on which age group it was suitable for assessing. I didn't place restrictions on the mother's gender or route to parenthood, family structure, relationship constellation, or partner gender or location. And I used convenience and snowball sampling to recruit my sample, mainly through social media, but also websites such as Pride Angel and Bisexual Plus mailing lists. So this was a survey which I was recruiting for, and it had multiple measures of different concepts. So this is kind of just a visual representation. So I was measuring things like maternal mental health, children's adjustment, minority stress, family processes, and resilience factors using the standardized psychometric scales that you can see on the right-hand side. So I'll just draw your attention to a couple of them. So in terms of minority stress, I was looking at the anti-bisexual experiences scale, 2 of the subscales from the daily heterosexist experiences questionnaire relating to experiences of discrimination from their family of origin, so from their family that they were raised in, and also experiences of discrimination or minority stress from to do with parenting. And I also looked at kind of internalized stigma indirectly through this self-acceptance of sexuality inventory, presuming that low levels of self-acceptance of sexuality would be highly correlated with high levels of internalized stigma. And my measure of children's psychological adjustment or children's well-being is the Strengths and Difficulties questionnaire. I'm happy to talk more about any of these standardized measures if that's something you're interested in. Briefly, before I move on to the results, because I'm aware of the time, a couple of details about my sample. So after the removal of troll responses and really incomplete responses, mostly where they had just given demographic information and then exited off the survey, I had 168 responses. And these participants identified with a range of different identity labels, sometimes multiple identity labels, which is why I use the term bi+ to kind of highlight this multiplicity. Around 81% identified as women. Participants came from 13 countries, but mostly from the UK and the US. Around 3/4 were white and around 1/4 were experiencing financial difficulties. There were various skews in terms of education, such that around 40% had a higher university degree, such as a master's degree, and about 1/3 had an undergraduate degree. So a very highly educated sample as a whole. And as I said, they had to have at least one child between the ages of 4 and 17. And the participants were in various different relationship constellations. The largest group had one partner, and most of these had a male partner, with fewer having a female partner. Around 21, or not around, but 21 had no partners, and 22 had multiple partners. And these people with multiple partners had a mode of 2 partners, a mean of 2.27 partners, and a range of 2 to 3 partners. Okay, so moving on to some of the findings. As I said, I'm particularly interested in differences based on relationship constellations, and I found that some forms of minority stress differed, levels of these forms of minority stress differed based on mothers' relationship constellations. So specifically, on the Daily Heterosexist Experiences questionnaire from their family of origin, and also to do with parenting, these scores differed significantly based on their relationship constellation, such that those with multiple partners had significantly higher levels of both of these types of minority stress than those with one male partner. So this shows the importance of attending to these differences based on relationship constellation. But interestingly, there were no other significant differences based on the relationships that they were in. So maternal mental health, social support, and LGBTQ community connectedness did not differ based on mothers' relationship constellation. I looked at minority stress as a predictor of maternal mental health based on the minority stress model. Interestingly, using regression analysis, minority stress did not predict or did not significantly predict depression, anxiety, and stress, but it did significantly predict mothers' self-esteem. And I also looked at the role of social support. So was social support a predictor of maternal mental health? And it did significantly predict both DAS-42 scores, so depression, anxiety, and stress. And it also predicted self-esteem on the Rosenberg self-esteem scale. I also looked at the relationship between maternal mental health and family functioning. And maternal mental health was a significant predictor of parenting stress. It also significantly predicted parenting quality and also parental relationship quality, so the relationship between the mother and their partner. But it did not predict co-parenting relationship quality, which was interesting. And I also looked at the role of minority stress in the family. So going beyond thinking about minority stress and its relation to individual mental and physical health outcomes, but thinking about kind of adding an extra box to this model to look at the associations between minority stress processes and family functioning. And interestingly, minority stress predicted parenting stress scale scores, but did not predict parenting quality, parental relationship quality, or co-parenting quality. And I also looked at the relation between different family processes. So looking at, for instance, did parenting stress predict parenting quality? Did parenting stress predict parental relationship quality? And I found that parenting stress significantly predicted parenting quality, but it didn't predict parental relationship quality. And then moving on to the third research question about children's well-being or children's psychological adjustment. Minority stress was not associated with children's or did not predict children's adjustment, and neither did financial difficulties. But parental mental health significantly predicted child outcomes, and so did family processes such as parenting quality, parental relationship quality, co-parenting quality, and parenting stress, highlighting the importance of parenting and family processes for children's adjustment. I also looked at whether children's adjustment differed based on their family structure, and there were no significant differences based on mothers' relationship constellations. So, for instance, we're isolating the role of kind of family structure and sexual orientation of parents to be able to look at their sexual orientation is obviously the same, they're all bi+, but we can look at, for instance, if there are significant differences between children raised in families with which appear heterosexual to those that are headed by a same gender couple, for instance. And as I said, there were no differences based on family structure. Except for the fact that of those with no partner, so mothers with no partner, their children had slightly elevated levels of adjustment difficulties, in line with some of the findings of previous research on different types of families that find that single parent families sometimes have more adjustment difficulties, or children in single parent families rather. But all of these scores are within the kind of typical range, except for this one that is just very slightly elevated. So moving on, just because I am aware of the time, this study goes beyond the comparative approach that's been taken by previous research. So instead of comparing bisexual plus mother families to other types of families, it focuses solely on this one type of family to better understand their experiences. And it provides insight into what matters for family functioning and children's adjustment. It also goes beyond looking at minority stress at the individual level, so it goes beyond only thinking about minority stress and its relation to kind of individuals' mental and physical health outcomes, but it considers minority stress within the family. So how does minority stress predict parenting stress or parenting quality or children's outcomes? And it also highlights the utility of combining minority stress theory with family systems theory to shift the focus to thinking about minority stress and its associations within the family. And therefore, it suggests the need to extend the minority stress model to better account for the relationships between minority stresses and family processes, such as parenting stress. There's various limitations to this piece of research. I'm sure you noticed some of these subsamples are very small, mainly because most of the participants had one male partner. So obviously some of these comparisons lack power, and future research should prioritize the recruitment of bisexual mothers in same gender relationships or those with multiple partners to kind of rerun this analysis with a larger sample and better power. Also, I mentioned most of the sample were white, and therefore this limits the kind of generalizability to bi+ mothers of colour who might be experiencing intersectional stigma or multiple stigmas based on both their race and their bisexuality. And therefore, future research needs to recruit more diverse samples to conduct this intersectional analysis to better understand their experiences. Also, this was a cross-sectional study, so we don't know what's happening in the long term. Perhaps there's the opportunity for a follow-up study, or future research could take a longitudinal approach. And also, I only focused on mothers' perspectives. I didn't include their partners or their children in this research, so future research could adopt a multi-informant design to kind of find out about the experiences of different people within the family, not just from the mother's perspective. And finally, this was a questionnaire study, so it's obviously limited by the usual problems that we have with self-report, such as social desirability bias. The takeaways from this research: certain forms of minority stress, particularly internalized stigma, predicted maternal self-esteem in line with minority stress theory, but minority stress did not predict depression, anxiety, and stress. So some findings that perhaps don't fit with the prior literature on minority stress and its effects on mental health. Minority stress also predicted parenting stress, highlighting the importance of considering the associations between minority stress and outcomes within families, so beyond the individual. As I said, I was interested in differences based on relationship constellation. This is the first study to investigate those in bisexual plus mother families. And levels of some forms of minority stress did differ significantly based on mothers' relationship constellations, particularly between those with multiple partners and those with one male partner. But there were no differences in children's adjustment based on their family structure, suggesting that what matters for children's adjustment is kind of family processes, so things like maternal mental health, parenting stress, and parenting quality, rather than family structure. And these are my references. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to hearing your questions and your thoughts on this research.
That's excellent. Thank you, Ellen. I will stop recording now and we can open the floor for questions.